जूम के पटल पे आए हुए सभी श्रोताओं का अभिवादन, सभी श्रोताओं को नमस्कार। आज भारतीय संस्कृति संसद, भारतीय भाषा परिषद, भारतीय विद्या मंदिर और भक्ति वेदांत के संयुक्त तत्वावधान में हमने विषय लिया है साइंस ऑफ कॉन्शियसनेस। और हमारा जो सर्कुलर निकाला गया है उसमें दो बातों की मुख्य चर्चा की गई है, लॉज ऑफ क्वांटम थ्योरी एंड कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ कॉन्शियसनेस। तो जहां हम कॉन्शियसनेस का कॉन्सेप्ट बोलते हैं तो वह एक दुविधाजनक स्थिति पैदा कर देता है कि इसमें हम इसको कंसेप्चुअलाइज कर रहे हैं कि कॉन्शियसनेस जो है इट इज एवर प्रिवेलिंग राइट फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग। नोबडी नोज द सोर्स ऑफ द अल्टीमेट consciousness, but whatever we see in the existing world, that is all because of the physical science, भौतिक विज्ञान का एक अंश है। लेकिन अभी तक यह हमें ज्ञात नहीं हो पाया है कि यह चेतनता का तत्व जो है वह आदिकाल में या बहुत पुरातन समय से कब से आया और कब तक रहेगा, इसीलिए इसको हम अनादि कहते हैं। तो आज हम साइंस ऑफ कॉन्शियसनेस के ऊपर में विचार करेंगे। भक्ति वेदांत के स्वामी बृहस्पति स्वामी जी अपना इस पर व्याख्यान देंगे और उनके व्याख्यान के पश्चात हम एक छोटा सा प्रश्नोत्तर सत्र भी रखेंगे और विषय प्रवेश तथा इसके बारे में आपको अल्प जानकारी देने के लिए मैं हमारी संस्था के अध्यक्ष डॉक्टर बी.डी. मुंद्रा को आमंत्रित करता हूं कि विषय प्रवेश के साथ में आप जो हैं वे बृहस्पति स्वामी जी का भी अल्प परिचय हमें दें। डॉक्टर बी.डी. मुंद्रा प्लीज।
Namaskar. Welcome to all friends on this occasion. In 2017, we held a conference of 3 days with the kind patronage or blessings of His Holiness Bhakti Swarup Brihspati Swami Ji and his team, and Bharatiya Sanskriti Sansad was also part of that. It was a grand celebration. At that time, subject was consciousness and quantum physics. A book was also published, and lot of learned and scholars from all over the world, they participated in the conference and they contributed by their articles in the publication. Consciousness was discussed at length in that session too. But इसको बोलते हैं ना, मन नहीं भरा. We wanted to know more. The subject is complex, at least to us ordinary people. Swamiji is making a study day in, day out, and they are doing a lot of work. So first of all, let me introduce about the Vyaktitva and Krititva of Bhaktivedanta Institute at Swamiji. Bhaktivedanta Institute, as you know, friends, at one time was offshoot from ISKCON. His Holiness Prabhupada Ji blessings was there and this institute was created under the guidance of Dr. T.D. Singh. He was a great scholar and devoted soul. And then this institute shifted to Calcutta, and it has been doing a wonderful service in pursuit of knowledge, in pursuit of telling people about bhakti and seva. If you go to the institute, you will find so many brahmacharis and sannyasis fully devoted. They have forgiven the pleasures of world, and they are highly educated, but they have dedicated the life for the cause and in seva of knowledge as well as bhakti. Bharati with Sanskriti Sansad, my friend, you know, is an institute which was established in 1956, and we always pursued the discussion on Bharatiya Sanskriti and also made presentations before you by a lot of renowned artists and scholars. And there were a lot of luminaries came to our institution. The institution is functioning since then, and it is doing well. And then later on, the headquarters were migrated to Calcutta. They are publishing many books time to time, particularly on Bharatiya Sanskriti. They have a school, or rather 2 schools in Bikaner. They are running skill development and training institute in all over India. And at the same time, they are publishing a magazine, research magazine in Hindi. They are pursuing, time to time, they are participating or pursuing conferences where renowned scholars do participate and discuss. So that institute is also doing very well. Now let me introduce our learned speakers today. First, His Holiness Bhakti Swarup Brijapati Swamiji, earlier known as K. Vasudev Rao, is a alumni of Kanpur, IIT. He did MTech in Computer Science in 1998. After a brief tenure of working as a software professional, he decided to contribute significantly himself to science, spirituality, interface under the able leadership and vision of Dr. T.D. Singh, the founder director of Bhaktivedanta Institute. His Holiness is president of Bhaktivedanta Institute and actively promotes discussions on science and spirituality. He is also editor of Bhaktivedanta Institute's reputed annual journal, Savigyanam, the scientific exploration of spiritual paradigm, and travels widely across India and abroad. His deep interest in foundations of mathematics, fundamentals of computer science and logic, and its relation to nature of reality as well as ancient Indian texts led him to interact and meet renowned scholars at Harvard, Princeton, ETH, Stanford, and MIT. He has himself delivered hundreds of talks on science and spirituality, computation and Bhagavad Gita, and others. Under his guidance and supervision, more than 110 national conferences and 2 international conferences were held, and over 200 papers and over 100 seminars and workshops have been organized by the Institute in past decade, which includes contribution from more than 20 Nobel laureates and world-renowned scholars. If time permits, there will be other scholar, Sri Varun Agrawal, His Holiness Bhakti Swarup Vijayendra Swamiji, but today the time may not permit, so we will hear him some other day. Varun Agrawal ji also graduated from prestigious Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Kanpur, obtaining B.Tech in aerospace engineering, and he worked on a project of solar-powered aircraft and was ranked first in the entire department. However, his longing for something deeper about life, which always bothered him, and finally culminated in meeting with illustrious scientist and saint Dr. T.D. Singh. By the way, Dr. T.D. Singh was known as Bhakti Swarup Damodar Swami, the founder director of Bhakti Vedanta Institute. Seeing new things, he began studying ancient Vedic wisdom under his guidance and dedicating himself completely to the cause of helping humanity through interface of scientific temper and spiritual wisdom. He is currently director of Bhakti Vedanta Institute, India, besides his various involvements. Varunji frequently travels across India and abroad and interacts with scholars and scientists all over the world, including those from the universities of Harvard, Princeton, ETH, Stanford, MIT, etc. He is also editor of Bhaktivedanta Institute's reputed science and spirituality journal, Savigyanam. So friends, today we will hear mostly from Vasudevji. The subject is, as you know, science of consciousness. Last time we discussed quantum physics and consciousness. Many people know about there is some relationship between or some interaction between quantum physics and consciousness, or rather this started with the double slit experiment, a famous double slit experiment in which a subatomic particle, when passing through two slits on a screen, whether it is particle or it wave, it depends on the choice of the person who is conducting the experiment, how he conducts the experiments, or how he views it. Similarly, there are many other aspects which we were unable to explain. In double slit experiment, when it was passing, the particle was passing, or subatomic particle was passing through the slit, sometime it passed as a particle and sometime it was seen as a wave. Why? The choice or thoughts or consciousness of the person who is experimenting affected the behavior of something which is physical. Similarly, there were lot of talk on the experiment which is famous, called Schrodinger's cat. There is also a paradox of two pair of binary particles, where two parts, one here and one may be millions of kilometers away, and when there is a change in one, there is simultaneous change in the other. What is the means of communication? So this led to a lot of discussion. And then how consciousness acts in this. This was raised many years. Although discussion on consciousness has been there, as far as we are concerned, it has been for thousands of years, from Vedas, Upanishads, Aranyaks, Puranas, Srimad Bhagavatam, Yoga Shastra. Every time we knew about consciousness and how it acts and what it is. And Bhagavan Sri Krishna himself explained in Gita. But as far as materialistic science in West is concerned, it was something a difficult puzzle for them. And that was right from the time of Plato and Aristotle, and later on right up to beginning of the 20th century, Max Planck, Heisenberg, Einstein, Schrodinger, Broglie, Bohm, so many scientists. they discussed. But nobody could reach a finally agreed theory. As far as I know, a lot of proposals are there. What this consciousness is, how it acts, that is still being discussed. But it acts, it is there. That is understood. What is accepted, that consciousness is there. Some, those who are atheists, they said that it is a action or physical action of, it is physics and chemistry and some bioscience in it. And it is a function of mind. Some say, and they do not subscribe to the view that there is a creator or there is a universal consciousness. There are others who believe that this universe is all creation of consciousness. The very Big Bang, which brought out lot of energy, first plasma, and then the matter was created and all the galaxies and planets they became. But before that, what was there? So a feeling was developing that is out of consciousness. When consciousness created, then ultimate reality became consciousness. Then what are its attributes? This was the question which was coming up in my mind. There are few things which we talk. You see, when we are in a temple and when a prayer is going on and Sandhya Aarti is going on, suddenly the Bhakti Bhav, that becomes high. Or where there is a crowd, it becomes, when it starts becoming angry, the wave of that anger from one person to other person, it increases the wave height so much that whereas one person would not have been that destructive or that angry, but when together they became so angry. So is it due to some resonance? I don't know. It's a question, right? Many times we say to each other that we are on the same wavelength. What is this wavelength? Its consciousness is in form of waves, so that we are on the same wavelength. Similarly, people say that when we are together, it creates a field of consciousness. We see the similar terminology in terms of energy. Is energy byproduct from consciousness? These are the questions which I am raising before Swamiji. He is a very knowledgeable person. He has studied quite a lot. He can answer some of the queries. But lot of this question has been debated quite a lot. In last conference, we heard Amit Goswami, who talked that this earth is conscious and everything is conscious. And when it is conscious and it is interconnected, you read Roger Penrose or David Bohm, who talks implicate order and super implicate order. What is all this? We do not know. So we will ask Swamiji to take us on this journey from the beginning and explain us what is consciousness, how it works, what are its laws, इसका गुण और धर्म क्या है. With these questions, I will request Swamiji to start. This will be a series of discussions. After one discussion is not enough. There are so many things to be talked, so many questions we have, and so many aspects. And how our Shastras come in. Brahmavad, Bauddha Darshan, Jain Darshan. Then we have our Yoga Shastra. We have our Ayurveda, where does all that fit in? Just as we have in physical sciences, physics, chemistry, biochemistry, and neurosciences, we will discuss that too, but one by one. So today let us start this discussion. And now I hand over, I request Swamiji to start.
Thank you very much, Mundraji. They are very profound questions. We have more questions than answers. That is consciousness field. So, but we are very blessed to have a person like Mundraji who is very, very curious and in this area, inquisitive. I have not seen a person who is so inquisitive about consciousness. He is as inquisitive as like a child, child. His curiosity is only increasing, I'm saying. So his questions make us think more. And thank you very much for your kind note about our institute as well as about myself. I'm a very small person. Great thinkers and rishis, and they have deliberated on this subject and they have left behind us. And today now we have science along with that, so we have to deal with that as well. So we'll try in a humble way, and it is not possible to cover all the aspects in this. Our Rajendra Swamiji also supposed to speak, but because of his some reasons he is unable to speak, but he will speak in the next talk. He would present many of these scientific theories, and I plan to present to give answers, and with science parallel the concepts in science. Anyway, today lecture it will be a little bit more introductory, and slowly we'll uncover many scientific theories as well as parallel concepts, or what could be possible answers, or what could be possible ways the reality of consciousness could exist. We will explore. So I will start with a short prayer to Sri Guru and all the teachers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. आप सभी को सादर प्रणाम and gratitude to Mundra ji and Bharatiya Sanskrit Sansthan and Bharatiya Vidya Mandir. We have been collaborating, and in this pandemic time, Mundra ji has found another way to continue the collaboration. Special thanks for that. So I'll share a presentation. Can you please enable the presentation? It is saying host disabled participant screen sharing. Please enable the screen sharing.
The screen sharing is enabled.
Thank you, sir. So we're starting today's Science of Consciousness series. This is lecture 1. Today is the lecture 1, and I will be trying to explain what exactly is consciousness, and it is not possible to truly get into the fundamental concepts of consciousness without bringing together science as well as spiritual and traditional wisdom. So I will be using the traditional wisdom, Vedanta, to answer some of the questions and whatever we have learned from our master, Dr. T.D. Singh, and many previous acharyas, teachers, both science and spirituality. So we stand on their shoulders. Consciousness is a mystery. If we see in Bhagavad Gita, it is a wonder actually. Lord Krishna says, Acharyavat pashyati kaschidenam. Some look on the soul as amazing. Soul is an amazing thing. Consciousness. We will go into the details, soul and consciousness, in coming lectures. What exactly is. But for now, we will use consciousness and soul in a synonymous way. Some look on the soul as amazing. Some describe him as amazing. And some hearing of him as amazing. While others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. So that is the topic we are going to deal. It is the most amazing field of knowledge, most exciting field of knowledge, and most surprising field of knowledge. So we expect all the difficulties we are facing in science, especially the science with its limited way of acquiring knowledge. We have a lot of data, a lot of scientific established facts and theories, and we have traditional wisdom, and we have our own experience. So putting together all this field of consciousness is a mysterious field, is an amazing field, an exciting field because of being mysterious. Same thing expressed a couple of centuries ago by Immanuel Kant. Two things fill the mind with ever increasing wonder and awe. The more often and the more intensely the mind of thought is drawn to them. They are the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. So these two aspects of our reality, they are haunting the humanity for several centuries. How the starry heavens above, the night when we lay down and look at the stars, we wonder what are they, where they come from. And Mundraji has talked about Big Bang theory. That is a result of the quest in that direction. And the moral law within us, we all have a sense of morality. What we think as moral may be different. I may accept something as moral, somebody may not accept that as immoral, somebody may accept something else as moral. But the fact is that there is a sense of morality in each of us. So what is this? Why there is a moral law within us, sense of morality within us? This is very surprising. What is the source? Why? So therefore, from the philosophical point of view, scientific point of view, even from the spirituality point of view, even the God himself is describing, Lord Krishna is describing the consciousness field as a very surprising field of knowledge. And Kathopanishad puts it very nicely that the fact that the atomic soul is within the body of a gigantic animal, in the body of a gigantic banyan tree, and also in the microbic germs, millions and billions of which occupy only an inch of space, is certainly very amazing. So this is more amazing. It is the same atomic soul which is moving the gigantic elephant and which is also moving the tiniest living beings like bacteria, which we cannot even see. So therefore it is certainly amazing. In the Kathopanishad we see, many of you must be knowing this, Nachiketa, the conversation between Nachiketa and Lord Yama. Nachiketa's father was performing an yajna, and he was asking his father, he's giving in charity all the things he has and animals. So the boy has asked his father, whom are you going to give charity? Whom are you going to give me as a charity? So his father, after being irritated, he said, I will give it to Yama, Lord Yama, Lord of Death. So the boy, he started moving to Lord Yama, and he reaches Yamaloka. And there he comes to know that Yama is out of the station. So he waits there 3 nights. When Lord Yama returns, one voice from the sky speaks that you have kept a guest waiting for 3 days without any food and water. So you would have to take, it is an offense, you have to take reaction. So therefore Lord Yama, in order to overcome the reactions, he offered the boy to ask 3 boons, 3 benedictions. I will offer you 3 benedictions. So the boy has asked, number 1, as to remove anger from his father and receive him when he goes back with grace. So Lord Yama immediately fulfilled it, granted it. Then he asked, teach me the fire yajna that leads one to heaven by its performance. So then Lord Yama teaches him the yajna, and then he also says that this yajna will be known from today as a Nachiketa yajna, Nachiketa sacrifice. Then the final one, most important one, he saves for the last, and he asks Lord Yama, there is this doubt in regard to a person who has died. Some say he exists after death, and some say he does not exist. I would like you to instruct me in this knowledge. So after hearing this, Lord Yama was a little bit perplexed. He is a very small boy, and he is asking a big question. The question, the most difficult question, the most intriguing question. He is not just asking yes or no, he is asking him to instruct him about this knowledge of this life and death. That is nothing but the consciousness that we are studying today. So Lord Yama, he tries to divert the child, Nachiketa, that you ask me why you want to know this knowledge. It is so difficult that even the demigods are not aware of this knowledge. Devas, even the demigods are not aware of it. Please ask something else. He says, I can give you a long, healthy life, prosperous life. I can give you the kingdom of whole earth. I can give you, I will send you these nice celestial women who are nicely decorated, and they can sing and dance very nicely. And no human being can attain them, but I will give you them. So in this way, Lord Yama has offered him everything in this world to persuade Nachiketa to ask something else. But Nachiketa said, no, I want to know this. What use is there of all these benedictions? Because they only reduce my life duration, strength of the senses. And they will all be lost at the time of death anyways. So therefore, he insists Yama to please teach as promised, not to back down. So Lord Yama, being pleased with the sincerity of the boy, Lord Yama starts speaking about the science of this consciousness, life and death. So when I see the enthusiasm of our Mundraji, I was remembering the Nachiketa. He has the same enthusiasm of Nachiketa to understand this consciousness, which is, of course, I am no Lord Yama, but we will try with the blessings of Lord Krishna and our teachers and all of you. little bit, but we can at least get that much knowledge which can satisfy us to our heart content and to make our life successful, this human life. Because the knowledge, any knowledge is unlimited. You take any branch of knowledge is unlimited, and there is so much unknown in every branch of knowledge. And what we know could be only a tip of the iceberg. So as a field of consciousness, and consciousness, we don't even know the tip yet from a scientific point of view. So Mundraji has put us some of the questions. Is consciousness a particle? Is it a wave or is it a field? I'm adding one more. Or is it an epiphenomena? This is what mostly the science thinks. Science thinks that consciousness is an epiphenomena. It doesn't have fundamental existence. It doesn't exist on its own, consciousness. It only arises because of certain interactions, maybe molecular interactions, neuronal interactions, or microtubules in the brain, etc., etc. There are many, many theories. We will go through them, and Varunji will start in the next class. And to summarize what science thinks about is put very nicely by Francis Crick. He is a genetist, he is a biologist. He got Nobel Prize for discovery of DNA. So he made this astonishing hypothesis, and scientists make astonishing hypotheses to advance the field of knowledge. He says your joys, your sorrows, your memories, and your ambition, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. So this is the summary of the scientific uh, direction where science is progressing, or the way the science is leading to. But the problem of consciousness is not very simple. They are some are simple, some aspects of consciousness, some are very, very hard. The easy problems and hard problems of consciousness. The easy problems of consciousness are those that seem directly susceptible to the standard methods of cognitive science, whereby a phenomenon is explained in terms of computational or neural mechanisms. So, what like artificial intelligence or machine learning. So we have some explanation how we are seeing, how we are tasting, or how things are happening, how our conscious acts, which are observable acts of consciousness, are happening through computational or neural mechanisms. So they are easy problems. For example, the ability to discriminate, categorize, or react to environment stimuli. The integration of information by a cognitive system. The reportability of mental states. The ability of a system to access its own internal states. So we can model them uh, into the neural networks, because we have some theory how these things happen, how we are able to respond to stimuli, or how we are able to recognize, distinguish, for example, a color, recognize a color, for example, a red color. So these can be modeled using neural networks, and it is happening. We can put filter, for example, light, we can put a red filter, and if there is you can put a photo sensitive device, and if there is current, we can say red is there, color, something like that. We can identify the red just like we recognize the red. So these are easy problems of consciousness. But however, even these easy problems we don't understand yet. Even the easy problems are difficult to understand for us. For example, the theory of why machines actually converge to an attractor, or in other words, learn to recognize complex patterns, is still unknown. So we have these neural networks, we know how they work. Like there are weights, there are calculation, there is a little algorithm, and then there is output. So therefore, for example, you give light and this neural network will process and say this is red. So we know how it works, but we don't know why it works. We know what is happening individually at each node, but as a whole, what actually making it to recognize, why it is recognizing, we still don't understand fully. Learning has also been conjectured to happen in a phase transition. Unfortunately, current mathematics and current theory aren't adequate to describe such phenomena, either in physics or in learning. So these are the difficulties. We are unable to understand how actually it is recognizing, what is making it to recognize. And there is a unsupervised deep learning. Nowadays it has been a great field, deep learning. Earlier they trained the neural network, but nowadays the, they have developed this deep learning techniques in which the network learn itself. For example, you show 100 pictures containing a dog, 100 pictures of a dog, and so the network will train itself to recognize a dog. So this is called unsupervised deep learning. So next time if you say a picture and ask whether it is a dog or not, it will tell it is dog. So using this deep learning, there is this company, NVIDIA, they have designed a self-driving car. This car did not follow a single instruction provided by an engineer or programmer. Instead, it relied entirely on an algorithm that had taught itself to drive by watching a human to do it. Getting a car to drive this way was an impressive feat, but it's also a bit unsettling since it isn't completely clear how the car makes its decisions. So now we have trained this car by seeing a human being it has learned. It is very nice that it can able to drive the car is able to drive itself. But the concern is that we don't know how it is making decisions. For example, if there is an accident, if it is put by will Nit, what if one day it did something unexpected, crashed into a tree or sat at green light? As things stand now, it might be difficult to find out why. The system is so complicated that even the engineers who designed it may struggle to isolate the reason for any single action. Why it stopped, there is no answer. We cannot isolate. For example, now if there is a problem in my computer or my mobile phone, we go and isolate the problem, which component is malfunctioning, and then I can replace it. But in this deep learning and in this neural networks, we don't know actually what went wrong, because in each decision, every node participates. So therefore, and you can't ask it. There is no obvious way to design such a system so that it could always explain why it did what it did. So this is the problem. So what I mean to say is that even the easy problems of consciousness are not easy, but relatively they have been designated as easy and hard, but hard problems are also very, very hard for us at the moment. We are able to achieve wonders, but we don't know how. We don't know why it works. Similarly, there is a there is a system developed by a team at Mount Sinai Hospital in US. They have developed a deep patient. They have many, many thousands of records of patients. So they have just given these records to this system. They don't need to do anything. They will just design the system to read it, and the system will learn itself. And the system has been so nice, so fantastic, that it is able to predict, we give a person's profile, what is his age, what is his medical parameters, and what he does. Then it predicts what disease he is going to get. And it is very, very astonishing to the doctors that even the doctors don't know how it is making the decision, what features it is uh, using, what features it is using in features. They know what features it is using, how it is weighing those features to arrive at the conclusion. But the conclusions, they are working. Similarly, nowadays the banking, if you want to give a loan, they are developing systems to uh, train the model, those who have paid the loan, those who have defaulted the loan. So therefore the system learns slowly, slowly, slowly. If you give enough data, of course we have enough data now. So it is already happening, and the system will tell whether this is risk or not risk. So when we say we can't give you loan, now bank manager can say why they are unable to give the loan. But when they use this system, the bank will derive immense benefit from risk, but the bank manager will not be able to tell why they are refusing to grant the loan. So it depicts how much we really understand the wonderful things that are happening around us in the artificial intelligence and machine learning. Then there are hard problems of consciousness. Hard problems are those that seem to resist easy methods. The really hard problems of consciousness is a problem of experience. So in the example of identifying the red, we have different means to isolate red from other colors and say this is red. But we have no way to explain the experience of redness. What is this experience of redness? What is this made of? What material is this experience called? So this is a hard problem. And who actually is experiencing? Similarly, the music, we listen nice music, we experience the music. Music is not just the frequency and notes. There is an experience of music which is quite different from the physics of the music. That experience is what is very hard to explain. It defies the easy methods. We can have a neural network to identify whether it is a violin, it is a flute. We may even have deep learning models where they identify the ragas. But the experience of a different particular raga and the emotions associated with it, what is it? How do we explain it? That we don't have. So this is very nicely put by Thomas Nagel, that what is it like to be a bat? So how bat is living its life. We know bat is a little bit different living being. It lives and sleeps differently, quite different to any one of us who would sleep. and the way it perceives the surroundings through sound. So what kind of world a bat is experiencing, we will be never be able to know, because the conscious experience is very first-hand experience. Conscious experience is a first-hand experience. It cannot be transmitted. Unless we ourselves become the bat and have the experience, what experience a bat is having, we will never be knowing. Sometimes we say, you don't know what I am going through. So we don't even know, even our fellow human beings, what they are going through in their mind, in their heart, or in their consciousness, what experience they are going through. And that's why many of our relationships, they sometimes fail, because we fail to understand what is going through them, what they are going through. Even the uh, something as simple as a rasgulla, unless we eat it, we will not be knowing how actually it tastes. I may explain to you, it is sweet, it is this, it is that, but every rasgulla is a different rasgulla. I mean, every time you make a rasgulla, it is a different taste and different flavors. So this conscious experience is a private experience. So it is not very easy to transmit conscious experience from one person to another person. The person has to experience it. So there comes the true problem of consciousness. It is very, very hard to perceive. It is very hard to measure. It is very hard to grasp. But all that conscious experience that is available to us is our own experience. My consciousness is first-hand experience to me, and that could be some gateway to understand consciousness. And that is a great hope also, because we ourselves are conscious beings. So easy and hard problems of consciousness, they can be depicted, summarized in this picture. In a hard problem of consciousness, there are two types of consciousness: phenomenal consciousness and functional consciousness. Functional consciousness is the stimulus and the response of the neurons. And the phenomenal consciousness is experience of that stimulus. For example, red is there. You can study the neurons which are processing this red, and we can understand it is the red that is being watched. But we will not be able to get the experience of that redness. So one is phenomenal consciousness, one is functional consciousness. Easy problem is functional consciousness. When there is a fire, we immediately take back our finger. So this is functional consciousness, functional aspect of consciousness, or observable aspect of the consciousness. So the neurons, they can take the decision and withdraw our finger even without our knowledge. Reflex, we say. So which means that the functional consciousness, or the functional aspect of consciousness, uh, it can be mechanized. Functional aspect of the consciousness, uh, it is not required to be conscious to withdraw the finger. Same as driving, many of us drive. In the beginning, we are very conscious by learning. Once we learn, we are very, very not so much conscious. We'll reflex, we'll take actions very easily. So nowadays we have these cars, self-driving cars, and they recognize also red and green. But a human being who is driving, he is also recognizing red and green. And what is the difference? The difference is that the human being has experience of the redness and the car has no experience. But still, to drive, what it shows is that in order to drive, we don't need consciousness, conscious being. This functional aspect of consciousness. Functional aspect of consciousness is not really the consciousness. That is a mechanism, machine, mechanized portion which is observable by us. So, which means that uh, the driving can be done without actually a conscious being present. So, however, the aspect, the approach of the science that everything is our neurons, this is the approach that science takes, and the reasons for that, why science does that, we'll see it shortly. But with that approach, there are problems, because if we assume something, and this is how we uh, solve our problems in science or in mathematics. We assume it is correct and then we proceed. And if there is some contradiction or problem, then we understand there is some uh, problem in our assumptions. Assumptions are not correct. So with the assumptions of science, there are problems that are arising. For example, the problem of morality. The problem of morality is that are neurons the ultimate culprits? The crime is done, who actually is responsible? And is it necessary to punish somebody because it is neurons firing in our brain? So is the justice system is really required? And whom to punish and why to punish? Somebody may say, my dear sir, my neuron has misfired, so at that time I did this wrong act. So how do we justify our theory and our practice? We're not able to reconcile the two important branches of knowledge, morality or law, with neuroscience. Of course, they are using neuroscience nowadays also to see whether he's speaking truth or uh, false, or to see if somebody will be criminal in the future. They are using some models, but the problem remains that the morality is really there? Is it really required? How do we explain this morality? And how do we have morality in this understanding of consciousness? Of course, there are some people who are realizing, but their views doesn't change the view of science. Science has a particular view. Similarly, when we send a robot to the space, we feel to bring it back. We don't feel to bring it back, but if we send a astronaut, we feel responsible to bring it back. So therefore, Roger Penrose is a friend of Dr. T.D. Singh. He recently got Nobel Prize. He's one of the deep thinkers. There are people who work within the framework that is already available, and there are some people who are deep thinkers. They go beyond the existing norm, and they think beyond the setup, beyond the normality. So Penrose is one of them. And when I saw these kind of problems, he is feeling that the legal issue of responsibility seems to imply that there is indeed within each of us some kind of an independent self with its own responsibilities. There should be a self which has responsibility as a fundamental property, because responsibility is not a byproduct of any molecular interactions. Similarly, in biology, we see that life, RNA, DNA, life is beyond just RNA and DNA. And our assumption that life originated from molecules is still unresolved, unsolved. But we behave as if it is solved, it is settled, and life is all chemical material. So Dr. T.D. Singh puts a very nice question. Which force or molecule makes mother love her baby or make baby happy? So our happiness, our feelings, love, these are all spring forth from more fundamental reality of consciousness. There is no force or molecule that we know in physics and chemistry. If it is so, Dr. T.D. Singh is asking, what is that force and what is that molecule? If somebody is upset with us, we can give the molecule of love and immediately he will be loving us. So, but there are more, this number is growing because of this growing field of consciousness studies. That consciousness is a principle that fundamentally transcends not only physics and chemistry, but also the mechanistic principles of living beings. So this is where we have to be very careful, and we think about the theory of consciousness, which we'll deal with them. That when we are trying to find the theory of consciousness, we are still trying to find a theory in the mechanistic principles, in the principles we have learned in physics, in chemistry, uh, in mechanics, in mechanistic principles. Mechanistic means cause and effect, mechanism. But we are not still looking at the other possibility or seriously studying other possibility of something which is transcendental to mechanistic principles, transcendental to physics and as well as chemistry. That is where is a great effort and difficulty in finding theory of consciousness using science. So science does not accept consciousness being transcendental. This is the main problem when it comes to bringing together science as well as spirituality together. The way they work, the science works, is quite different. It's called naturalism. Naturalism means reality is exhausted by nature, containing nothing supernatural. So they already conclude before investigation. This is because of different reasons, difficulties they have with the religion. They wanted to eliminate any difficulties or unfounded claims by religious practitioners who are very influential. Science has taken this route of naturalism. So from the very beginning, they will eliminate anything supernatural. Natural means they mean the physics, chemistry. This is so there is no room for supernatural entities, and they deal only with objective and observable or verifiable truths. So that is how the science works. But here we have seen that consciousness is not easy to observe. We cannot observe, like, what is it being a bat? Consciousness. Consciousness is not objective. It is not the same. And it is often accompanied by naturalism, is often accompanied by physicalism. What is physicalism? All phenomena are fundamentally physical. And the concept in physicalism is supervenience, which means that if two systems different from each other, if two systems differ from each other, chemically, biologically, psychologically, or in any other respect, they differ also in they differ also in physically, which means this is to say that all differences that occur between different systems are basically physical. This is how the science works. So the scientists, they work. That includes biological system, psychological system, or physical system. They finally boil down to physics. That is how the science and scientists, they work. But however, consciousness is subjective. For example, same person is observed as friendly by one person and adversary by a different person. So different observers, they're observing it differently. So consciousness is very, very subjective. And same Rasgulla, somebody is very pleasant, somebody not very pleasant. Somebody is liking, somebody not liking. So consciousness is very, very subjective and very personal. The same person is acting in one way in with one person and in another way with another person. But in the case of physics, when we are dealing with the matter, the stone is objective. It is objective. It is objective. If I drop or you drop or anybody drops, it behaves exactly the same way. Or if you drop in India or if you drop in America or in Europe, it is the same thing which will, the same motion, it will follow, observe. So here is the basic difficulty in theory of consciousness. The science is trying to give a physical theory of consciousness. But whereas consciousness, is it physical? That is a big question mark. But there are enough reasons, those who think deeply, to think consciousness as not an objective. It is subjective. And this is growing. And consciousness is not physically observable. We cannot be captured under a microscope. This is another difficulty. If something which we cannot observe with an instrument, how do we accept such a thing exists? Someone has drawn on the screen. Please erase it. But consciousness is not physically observable. When I'm smiling, you really do not know whether I'm really smiling or am I angry inside. So even for a conscious being is difficult, then what to speak about the instruments. So the physical instruments, objective instruments, they cannot observe consciousness. Now, we may train a deep learning system to tell whether somebody is angry or just like we try to figure out. It may give by learning whether it is alive or not, but it is still not observing the consciousness per se. So therefore, we are in a difficult situation. Either science need to change, otherwise there is no science of consciousness. That means either new science, if the science continue function the same way it is functioning now, it is not so easy to have a science of consciousness, or it may be not possible at all to have a physical theory of consciousness, as science is hoping and many scientists are hoping. We need to change the science itself. Sir Roger Penrose supports this new science, but whether he means the new science the way we are meaning, that is a little different. It could be a little different. He means there could be another branch of science which may be needed, or a little different way we do it. But to accept something, some transcendental entity within science, that is a big change, big new science. But still, but the direction, he is speaking in this direction, and it is very appreciated by Dr. D. Singh. They have this book on their conversation. All thinking scientists agree that we all have consciousness and free will, but the present scientific knowledge cannot explain this. We need a new science. This is very, very clear. We all have free will, and there is no free will. Physics, mechanistic way of dealing with the reality. Quantum mechanics are still deterministic, Penrose says. There is a not deterministic portion and deterministic portion. So if we really want to understand free will in consciousness, we definitely need a new science. But a little bit more than what Professor Penrose thinks. That is Dr. T.D. Singh adding that spirituality should be a partner in new science. Then only we can have true theory of consciousness. Otherwise, theory of consciousness will be elusive, and we may not be having good explanation of consciousness. We have many theories already coming, but many either lack evidence because science wants evidence, and uh, many may are not very satisfactory explanation. So with that in the background, today we'll deal a little bit about this question: is consciousness a particle? This is how we are trying to understand the consciousness. Is consciousness is a particle? So what is a particle? Particle is a small localized object to which can be ascribed several physical or chemical properties such as volume, density, or mass. So again, the particle is a physical particle. It's something that has a location. Volume means some size. Density or mass. These are the properties that we know and we can measure in science. If something is a particle and doesn't have these properties, we have no idea of existence of such a thing and how it looks. And science doesn't bother about such particles. It may be there, it may not be there, but we are not concerned. We'll stick to what is observable. And if it is a particle, these are the properties that we know: volume, density, mass. And these are some of the fundamental particles in physics. And we study these properties. But however, our scriptures say that consciousness is a particle. If you see the second sloka, Sankhya Tito hi Chitkanaha. Chitkana. Kana means particle. And it gives also the size of this Chitkana. And it says, when the upper portion of the hair is divided into 100 parts, and again each of such part is further divided into 100 parts, each such part is measurement of the dimension of the soul. And the second sloka says the same thing, but in the last it says something very quite interesting. Sankhya Tito hi Chitkanaha. Means it is beyond numbers, means able to count. It means two things. It can mean innumerable particles, infinite number of particles. And it also means that size is beyond any numbers. So what does that mean? It could mean that we cannot actually measure it. So if you calculate the size, it is mentioned in the scripture, the hair cross section is 5000 micron square. So 10,000 parts will be 0.005 micron square. So the soul size is 550 into 10 power minus 16 meters square. Very, very small. But at the end again it says Sankhya Titohi. It is beyond any numbers. So which means that we cannot actually measure it. But because we want to know the size, it is mentioning. But then why it is giving such a small size? Why not some big size? So it could be the point of interaction with the body, where it interacts. For example, when we play video game, the point of contact which we have with the whole computer big screen is only the mouse wire, small wire. So from the world of the computer, you see there is one small port, some electric signals are coming. We don't know what is happening beyond that. We have no idea somebody is sitting before the computer. So that which is moving this game is only coming from very, very small port. So, so that could be, this is not what it is mentioned in the scripture, but this could be one of the explanations. We can also uh, understand when we ask whether consciousness is a particle, we are still thinking in terms of our physics, the physics that we know. But it is quite possible that this particle is completely a different physics. It is not a physics at all. Our physics may not at all apply to it. It will be a completely different particle which escapes all our physics, all our instruments. The possibility is there. For example, I will just show you on. This is a simulation of fluid, how it flows in a obstacle. If there is a fluid, a line, there is a, for example, there is a plate. How it actually, how the fluid moves. It is a simulation. Now within the simulation, we see many particles, right? There are also some dots, or maybe water particle or water molecule is modeled there. So now let us think about the particle in that system. Is a particle in the simulation on the screen, right? For example, the dot which we are seeing is one of the particle, let us say, or a pixel. Not pixel, what we are seeing visually. Is that a particle? The question is yes as well as no. Yes, it is a particle in the world of simulation. In its world of simulation, it is a particle. It is modeled and it follows the laws of simulation. But the laws that exist in the simulation are quite different from the laws which we have here on the physical, in the physical world. There are mathematical laws which are governing the movements, and actually there is no particle that exists there that is there in this world. Please think about this. If we are in the world of simulation and try to understand the particle in the real world, how much knowledge will we really have of the particle in the real world? If we study the screen, what we get is only pixel. Pixels are moving, and if somebody goes a little bit inside computer, there is some program running, instruction codes, whatever. But when we are in the simulation world, if we are in that screen world, all that we have accessible is only this. So the laws of simulation, the particle that is the particle in the simulation is a particle in the world of simulation, but it is not a particle outside. It is just a screen. It is not moving anything, just standing. Everything is standing. Only pixels are changing the color. Similarly, a particle outside the simulation world is not a particle in the simulation. So they are completely two different worlds. We may have some guess, some understanding about the particle in the real world with the particle in the simulation. Some behavior we may see, but the entire knowledge of the particle in the real physical world cannot be known by seeing the simulation alone. Unless one has access to both worlds, you will not be able to understand properly the both particles. One who has understanding of both worlds, he can perfectly understand the nature of particle in the real physical world as well as the nature of particle in the simulation world. So this is a difficulty. When we say, is consciousness a particle? How much access we have to the world of consciousness. Is consciousness part of this world? Is consciousness part of this world? I am trying to deduce conclusions about the nature of consciousness with the knowledge of the physical properties of this world. So that is where is the difficulty. So Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he says that kshetra kshetragnayor gnanam, the knowledge is complete only when one knows not only the matter, physics, chemistry, and mechanistic principles, but also when one knows kshetragna, the soul who knows this kshetra. So we are trying to, the difficulty in the scientific approach is that we are trying to understand the consciousness with the properties of this world, assuming that either it is epiphenomena of these particles, or trying to guess that this is like other particles of this world. So this is a great world. If one has knowledge about spirit as well as the knowledge of the matter, that means one who has knowledge of the physical particle as well as the spiritual particle, he can actually understand. And that is actually Krishna calls only that is knowledge. It may be a little harsh or a little bit surprising, because anything is a knowledge. I know about pepper, I know about atom, I know about anything. It is a knowledge, but that is not true knowledge. True knowledge is knowing matter and spirit and their interactions. So unless we accept this possibility of the simulated particle in the simulation world and the real world, how they are different. Similarly, the soul or consciousness being a particle in its own spiritual world could be exactly quite different to the particle in this world, just like the particle in the simulation is different from the particle in the physical world. So unless this approach, this possibility is not accepted, consciousness may not be understood. So therefore, Chitkana is immeasurable. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that the material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharata. Here he is giving properties of the spirit soul. Material body of the eternal, immeasurable, indestructible living entity. So, living entity has three qualities Krishna has given: indestructible, it cannot be destroyed; immeasurable, aprameya, aprameya. Aprameya means which cannot be measured. So I have taken a lot of time. I have more. Couple of 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I have 4 slides. So why it is immeasurable? Because we are trying to measure it using the properties that we know. If the consciousness is fundamentally different, can our scale and time clock can measure the consciousness? For example, if I give you a scale and ask you to measure time, will you be able to measure time if I give you a scale? Or if we give you a clock and ask you to measure distance from our airport to train station, in order to measure distance, we need some instrument which has the property of the quantity we are trying to measure. So if consciousness is fundamentally different, how can we measure the consciousness using the instruments which don't have the property of consciousness? So this could be the reason why this consciousness escape our instruments. So if our instruments, if consciousness escapes our instruments, how are we going to have theory of consciousness? How do we have a mutually agreeable, accepted theory of consciousness if it escapes our instruments? This is a big question. So another way to look at it is that using the video game example, we'll go into it later on, that we accept some body in some character in a game. So being only in the world of game, not looking at outside, we cannot know the size of the person who is playing that character, because the person is outside of that world. The person who is animating that character of the game is not within the game. We may have a scale inside the game, but that scale has no access to the real person outside the outside the. So similarly, if consciousness is outside of this world, physical world, but interacting in this world, how are we going to measure it, or how are we going to capture it, and how are we going to have a theory of consciousness accepted? So therefore, our Vedic, in the Bhagavad Gita only, Krishna says clearly there are two kinds of realities, matter and spirit. Pinna prakriti rashtadha. So this matter, we will go into details a little later in the coming classes. Krishna very clearly mentions that matter and spirit both are fundamentally different realities, and both of them are not created. Neither matter is created nor spirit is created. Both are existing always. They are always conserved. But the only difference is matter undergoes transformation. So therefore this world is created using the same energy. That energy will always remain. Energy is never created. Either matter or spirit, spiritual energy or material energy. It is never created. It is always existing in some form, either in kinetic, potential in different fields. So there is no question of energy being created. Energy is always existing. Even this material world, before being created, it exists. In the Bhagavatam, it is there. We'll go through it in the future. But who can know this consciousness? Can anybody can know about this consciousness? Like any other subject? Our Upanishads, they say that one who has not desisted from bad conduct, who is not restrained, nor one without concentration, nor even one whose mind is not still, can know this even though learned beyond compare. So one may be very expert, intelligent, knowledgeable, very sharp, learned in many subjects, deep, uh, interdisciplinary study, very, very prominent, but still he cannot understand the science of consciousness, because science of consciousness is a spirituality. Sense of consciousness, we enter into the realm of spirituality. Spirit consciousness is spirit, and spirit science requires some discipline also. It is not only just study. This is what Kathopanishad says. So if we have a theory of consciousness, we need people who practice both disciplines, spiritual discipline, scientific discipline, and understand deeply both. And so we will try to present some of these theories in the future. And we have discussed a little bit about particle nature of consciousness. Similarly, we discuss energy nature or field, or some other natures which we discuss in future classes. And Rajendra Swamiji, he will talk about different scientific theories. He will present nicely how different theories, there are different problems they're coming up, what is the reasons. So thank you all for your patient listening. I have taken enough time, so we can have any questions for 10 minutes.
श्रोताओं में हम सबसे अनुरोध करेंगे कि अपने प्रश्न पूछने के लिए स्वामी जी से आप अपने हाथ उठाएं और हम मात्र 3 प्रश्न लेंगे जिनके जो 15 मिनट की अवधि में पूरे किए जाएंगे। आप अपने प्रश्न उठाइए। अभी तक मैंने कोई प्रश्न के लिए आपकी तरफ से आग्रह नहीं पर आप हैं। अच्छा, राजगोपाल जी आप अनम्यूट कर लें अपने आप को। हाँ, आप प्रश्न करिए राजगोपाल जी।
नमस्कार स्वामी जी।
नमस्कार राजगोपाल जी।
आज इस पेंडेमिक में हमें एक बहुत अच्छा मौका दिया, मैं ये समझता हूँ इतना सुंदर अवसर दिया है कि हम अगर कहीं बाहर आपको सुनते तो इतनी अच्छी तरह हमारी जिज्ञासाएं शांत नहीं होती और हम समझ भी नहीं पाते। लेकिन मेरा एक निवेदन है कि इस तरह की कक्षाएं कम से कम 7-8 आप जरूर लें, ताकि हमारे मन में जो भी जिज्ञासाएं हों उन्हें हम अच्छी तरह समझ पाए। देखिए, जो इस तरह के भाषण होते हैं उनमें दूर बैठते हैं, इस तरह से पूरी जिज्ञासा समझ में नहीं आती है। मेरा एक छोटा सा प्रश्न है, जैसे पुरुष सूक्त में अपने चेतना को सर्वव्यापी मानते हैं, वो चेतना और ये कॉन्शियसनेस क्या एक है? और फिर जैसे महर्षि अरविंद ने या रामकृष्ण परमहंस ने जो चेतना जो उन्होंने फील की अपने सारे जीवन में, जिस चेतना के अगल बगल वो रहे, क्या वो चेतना और जो कॉन्शियसनेस आज फिजिक्स जिसके ऊपर इतना रिसर्च कर रहा है वो क्या एक है? और नहीं तो उसमें क्या अंतर हो सकता है?
Thank you, sir. Very nice question. So first is the consciousness which they are feeling and the consciousness which the science is studying. Yeah, now we can say it is the same consciousness they are studying, but they don't know. In the science, we don't know what it is. And but even the scientists have a conscious experience. It is not that scientists don't have conscious experience. They also have. When they eat the taste of experience, redness. They have love. Each one of us are having conscious experience. Each living being is having conscious experience, and that is the fundamental definition of a living being is one which has conscious experience. Can I have one definition like that? So as far as universal consciousness and our consciousness, so there are different views in Indian system, but Krishna in Bhagavad Gita very nicely describes about living beings who are whose consciousness is limited, and Paramatma whose consciousness is unlimited. In the Kshetra Kshetragna Gnana, Krishna says that the living being, the soul is conscious of only its body. The example Krishna gives. But whereas the Paramatma who has universal consciousness, he has consciousness of all the bodies. This is the difference. With example. For example, I don't know what you are feeling. When you eat, I don't become satisfied. I have to eat. But when we eat, Krishna becomes satisfied because he knows exactly what experience. He can experience what we are experiencing also. And because he loves us as we are his children, he takes more pleasure when we eat. So there is a lot of further things that will come in the future. The difference between the soul and the Paramatma. There is a conception that soul and Paramatma, they always remain separate or they will mix again like one. So that also we'll discuss in future. But to be short answer, our consciousness and the universal consciousness, they are different. And matter consciousness, actually matter has no consciousness. So zero consciousness, unit consciousness, and infinite consciousness. There are three things. So the two categories of reality, Matter has no consciousness, spirit has consciousness, but within the spirit also there are two categories. One is limited, another is infinite. The one which has limited consciousness, its number is infinite. And the one which has infinite consciousness, its number is one. Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman. We are nitya means eternal, means we are not going to cease to exist. Nityo nityanam, nitya means the singular nitya, nityanam, we are nityanam, the plural. Chetanas chetananam, chetana, the supreme one consciousness, chetananam, the plural consciousness. Eko bahunam, one is eka, another is baha, almost infinite. Yo vidadati kaman. What is the difference? The one is bestowing the desires of the unlimited. Unlimited one, you understand? The one which has unlimited consciousness is fulfilling the desires of unlimited, limited consciousness. And they remain so like that.
विजय जी,
ऋचा जी, हाँ राजगोपाल जी,
नमस्कार।
आप कुछ कह रहे थे? हाँ ऋचा
मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
हाँ आ रही।
हाँ आ रही।
अच्छा, मैं सिर्फ एक अपने लिए रिकैप करने के लिए पूछना चाहती थी आपसे कि आपने जो समझाया कि हम सोल को ना मेजर कर सकते हैं, ना हम उसे ढूंढ सकते हैं, ना वो कर पाते हैं, क्योंकि हमारा मेजरमेंट का तरीका ही नहीं सही है। हमारे पास वो टूल्स ऑफ मेजरमेंट ही नहीं है जिससे सोल को मेजर किया जा सकता है।
Perfect, yeah.
So that is the most important thing. That is why we, as scientists, yeah, people of this world, or practical examples, जिनको चाहिए, वो they are not able to find the true answer or find the true seeking. Is that correct?
Yes, we don't have a tool to measure, to catch
We don't have
conscious.
a tool to measure. Yeah. Okay.
So given that fact, now how do we have a theory of consciousness? That is the question.
Okay. And I had a related question, not concerned with your topic, but like you said, our souls are the part of the ultimate infinite consciousness. We are all a part of that. So does the theory of healing, distance healing or pranic healing or energy healing, flow from the same thought that the flow, because we are all connected in this way, the positive energy can flow from the Paramatma to us, to the person it is being sent to? Is that theory interconnected?
Wonderful question. We are all connected through Paramatma, not independently. For example, even our act of speaking, right? When I speak, the voice is coming out. This is also facilitated by Paramatma. In the future, we will see that the question comes, how non-physical entity is interacting with the physical entity. This is a question, this is a big problem in science. That how something transcendental to matter is able to interact with the matter. So one thing is that consciousness is superior, and another thing is that the Paramatma is mediating. Just like when we are very small child, whatever we do, our mother mediates, right? Whether we eat, whether we sit, whether we get up, whatever we do, our mother mediates everything we do. But the job of the Lord, God, is much more than mother. Even to say Ma, Krishna has to help. God has to help, because the Atma spirit, Krishna is God, is the supreme spirit, is mediating the soul to interact with the matter body. Not only that, he is maintaining this body. Like my father maintains the car, I keep driving. Right? That is the father is at the cost of father.
Yes.
So the God is not only mediating me and this body, he is also maintaining this body, sustaining this body. putting this in the working condition, because I don't know. I have not created it.
Yes.
My father and mother, they are thinking they have created it, but they also have not created. They don't know what is. We have to go to doctor. They cannot do it. So it is the Lord who is mediating every action of us, translating into action in this world, because we are not in this world. We don't belong to this world. We are somewhere outside. Somewhere outside. So Krishna says, Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hrudadeshardana Tishtati. So the Lord has entered into each living being to mediate the soul's interaction with the body. One of the reasons. There are many reasons. One reason, because this is a discussion. So either we talk about our interaction with our body, or some pranic healing or energy healing, they all have meaning, they all work, because Paramatma mediating. And these systems are given by him only.
Yes, and the source of energy when we as a healer start is always from him. We ask
Yes.
him for the energy,
Yes.
and then we transfer it. So the source is always him.
Yes. Very nice, wonderful.
Thank you.
So that healing is like a prayer to send the
Yes.
energy. And yeah, definitely Supreme Spirit is involved.
Yeah.
Actually, if you read Srimad Bhagavatam, Maya, the Maya is defined as, Krishna defines in the Bhagavatam, Maya is defined as that aspect which makes us think that particular aspect or phenomena of this world has no connection with the Supreme. If you see something is acting autonomously without the involvement of the Lord, whatever is causing you that is Maya. Because in reality, the Lord is personally involved in every act of this universe, in every phenomena. Andantara Paramanantarashchayam. He is present in the atom also, he is present in the Brahmanda also. He is making the atom work, also Brahmanda also work. Why? Because we want to play here. Thank you. I hope it answers. Any other question?
स्वामी जी
नमस्ते मुंद्रा जी.
नमस्ते. बहुत अच्छा बोले भाई.
आपका आशीर्वाद सर.
नहीं आशीर्वाद तो आपका स्वामी जी लोग का चाहिए. There are a lot of questions, but time is not permitting. It is already we have passed the limit. So I would suggest that all those who have questions, they can send it to us by mail to Bharatiya Sanskriti Center, and we will put in our mail address also once more, or you can contact us, and then in the next session we will forward it to Swamiji. It's like answering, he will take up the answers in next session, because now it is 7:15. I also have so many questions. I can ask him some other time also, but I will also put forward my questions, and I will suggest that with thanks to Swamiji, I will request now Rajgopalji to propose vote of thanks, and let us conclude the session today, to be discussed next time, with a wish that next time Varunji is all right, and we will have wonderful experience of listening to him. He is more detailed.
Yes, will be more exciting. And we will, if there are questions, we will first start with the questions, because today we
will start with the questions.
More class.
My second suggestion is that I would suggest that you listen to this talk from the recording which is there, which will be put on the web. you can listen to the talk again, and then you can decide about your questions. Thank you very much, Swami ji. Namaskaram.
सबको प्रणाम, आपको प्रणाम और
राजगोपाल
थैंक यू
जी।
ऑल।
राजगोपाल जी, आप वोट ऑफ
प्रणाम स्वामी जी।
प्रणाम प्रणाम राजगोपाल जी।
मैं सबसे पहले भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी जी को प्रणाम करता हूँ, डॉक्टर टी.डी. सिंह
जय
को प्रणाम
प्रभुपाद।
करता हूँ कि उनके
जय
कारण आज हमें इतनी बड़ी संस्था ये मिली और आप लोगों का सानिध्य मिला। मैं आपको पुनः प्रणाम करता हूँ और ये मेरा नम्र निवेदन है कि इस तरह की चर्चा अपने समय समय पर करते रहें और उसमें व्यवधान ज्यादा न दें, क्योंकि एक जो कंटिन्यूटी जो स्टडी की रहती है वो अगर जल्दी एक निश्चित समय पर होती रहे तो हम लोगों को बहुत अच्छा लगेगा। मैं आपको पुनः प्रणाम करता हूं और मैं आशा करता हूं कि भविष्य में आपकी कृपा हम लोग पर बनी रहेगी। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद, सबको मेरा प्रणाम, especially for your patience listening, because easy to speak, difficult to listen, especially on not on directly. So I will meet again soon, maybe in some months time or more.
or maybe earlier. Swami ji, maybe earlier.
With that
उससे जल्दी कीजिए।
We will discuss.
okay sir.
अच्छा, नमस्कार।
नमस्कार नमस्कार।